Are there things you can do in paranormal research and investigation that can provide better results and evidence? Are there certain practices and norms that can be adopted and standardized throughout the paranormal field? How important is experimentation in paranormal investigation? Should you ever provoke spirits, and what can be the consequences when you do? Tonight I talk with author and seasoned paranormal investigator Jack Kenna about these things, along with some of the most active locations he's investigated and some of his most compelling experiences while investigating the paranormal. Well, greetings and welcome once again, fellow truth seekers. You are listening to Passion for the Paranormal, bringing a passion for the paranormal to you. I'm your host, Curry Stegan, and so excited to be here with you once again. And I've got Jack Kenna joining me tonight, and Jack is a seasoned and longtime paranormal investigator. He's an author. He's also appeared on the Paranormal TV series Haunted Case Files and Paranormal Survivor. And so it's going to be great to talk with Jack about some of his amazing experiences as a paranormal investigator. And if you haven't been over to the website, pay us a visit over there at passion, the number 4, theparanormal.com. There you can catch up with some past episodes. You can also check out some cool Passion for the Paranormal merchandise. If you haven't been to the Facebook page, pay us a visit there as well at facebook.com/passion, the number 4, the paranormal. And you can like and follow us there. And if you know of a friend, family member, coworker you think you would like to tune into the show, please share a link with them. Make sure whatever podcast app you're using to hit that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate that. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into this discussion with Jack. I'm really looking forward to this one. I love talking with paranormal investigators about their experiences and some of the things that, some of the takeaways they have from many years of paranormal investigating. So thank you so much for tuning into the show. Really hope you enjoyed tonight's episode and my discussion with Jack. Okay, so joining me tonight is Jack Kenna. And Jack is one of America's most respected and accomplished paranormal investigators, as well as an accomplished author, public figure, and adjunct teacher of his courses on paranormal research. He is a member of the paranormal team S.P.I.R.I.T.S of New England and founder of Rensselaer Paranormal Research. Jack is also a series lead on the TV series Haunted Case Files and has also appeared on the TV series Paranormal Survivor. In June of 2018, Jack released his second book, Paranormal Research, which is now used as a mandatory textbook for his college-approved Paranormal 101 research courses. Jack, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you, Curry. It's great to be here. Always a pleasure, and thanks for reading the bio. I try to keep shortening up the bio more and more all the time. Just hit on the key points. Because I always hate hearing my bio, to be honest with you.
No, hey, it's quite an impressive resume you have there.
Weird, that's all.
Sure, but an impressive resume, no doubt. And I'm wondering if, and I usually do this with all my guests, I like to hear their backstory. I like to hear what really drove you to get into this field and how this all came about for you. So if you could just take us back to how this all started for you, how you got involved in doing all this paranormal research and in investigating.
Yeah, actually, my backstory actually is just being, I think they already aired in Canada. It was told on another show called My Paranormal Nightmare, which we filmed back last April in 2019. And I know it's aired up in Canada, it might be airing down here pretty soon. But actually, the experience that I had made me get out of the paranormal. It was a pretty terrifying experience where I actually kind of saw something demonic, and some really strange things happened, and I totally got away from the paranormal altogether. That was at age 17, and it just frightened me so much. I actually put it out of my head, forgot about it all, focused on my friends, family, school, hunting, fishing, everything else, and totally moved away from the paranormal. It wasn't until Ghost Hunters came out that, and I had totally forgotten about that whole other experience by the time Ghost Hunters came out. And that kind of rekindled my interest a bit, and I was like, wow. And I still had not remembered what the terrible thing that happened. I think I pushed it so far out that I totally forgot about it. And And I watched their show and what they were doing, and it was kind of related a lot to what I do. I work for the Department of the Army as well. I work in engineering, and it kind of what they were doing and some of the equipment they were using is stuff I work with. So that caught my interest, and I went online to their what they called the Beyond Reality forum, which Jason Grant had. It was all part of that whole TAPS stuff, their TAPS team stuff. And I think it was Britt Griffith was the one that was running it, and it was his wife at the time running the chat room. And I met some friends there: Ellen McNeil, Sharon Kugler, Beck Gann. They were all just getting together themselves. They all lived out in Winthrop, Massachusetts area, and Boston, Massachusetts area. And over a year of just chatting with them, they formed their own team, Spirits of New England. And it wasn't until, oh God, almost another year later that I met them for the first time at a TAPS event up at the Spalding Inn. And we hit it off. We were great friends, and they asked me to be part of their team. So I became part of Spirits of New England. And so I was never an original founder of the team. I became just a member, and they always like to say I was the lost puppy they found on the street and felt sorry for me and took me in. But I ended up being their tech guy because I knew all about all the computer stuff, the technologies, the equipment. So I ended up being that, and I kind of just started working with them, and we wanted to really focus on helping people, like originally, Ghost Hunters always did, with trying to help private clients or residential cases, and that's what we focused on. And we just kept doing that, and we still do that to this day. And I found I really enjoyed it, really liked it. Found out I had some other abilities I was not totally aware of. That another friend of ours from another team helped me figure out, and her name is Becca Boyd, and she's a sixth-generation psychic medium. And her partner Katie Boyd ran another paranormal team that we reached out to help us with our cases, because they'd been doing it for many years, and we were fairly new at the time. So they helped us out, and we reached out to other teams and learned a lot from them. And that's how I got started really into it and really focusing on helping people. And then it wasn't until, you're going to find this maybe a little strange, but it wasn't until, we all watch Ghost Adventures, watch all those shows, they're fun entertainment. But I did watch Zach Bagans' The Demon House, his documentary, which is completely different than his show. I know most people know that by now. Anyways, that demon that he said he had seen and dealt with was the exact thing I saw when I was 17. And that was no joke. When I saw that on his show, it brought everything back. Everything just came flooding back into me, and it still kind of freaked me out. And but I dealt with that, and I came to terms with the fact that he presented that on his show told me he probably did see the same thing, because it's exactly what I saw. That big thing with the demonic horns and everything else. The funny thing is, it was only like 3 weeks later that Our House Media, who I'd been working with on Haunted Case Files and all that, contacted me about telling my origin story for my paranormal nightmare. And it already just flooded back to me. So it's kind of weird how things fall into place and things happen for a reason. And I think I forgot about it for a reason, so that eventually I could get back into the paranormal and start helping people. Things clicked, and it came back to me at a point where I could tell my origin story for, what the true origin story is, and maybe that helps people too. So that's how I originally got out of the paranormal, got back into the paranormal, and then still in the paranormal, and doing more, and reaching out to more people.
That's great. Yeah, and what I wanted to ask you was, now you had this experience at 17 years old, which sounds like it was very frightening. Now, did you also have experiences as a younger boy? Where did it really start for you, where you had your first paranormal experience that you said, wow, there's something to this?
Well, I had experiences like pretty much all my life, as far back as I can remember, which is probably about 5 years old. I remember in the house I grew up in, which I'm still in the house I grew up in, as a matter of fact. I'm in my home right now. I would hear what sounded like my mother calling my name, and I'd go looking for her and say, "What do you want, Mom?" And she goes, I haven't been calling you," but it would sound just like her voice, and it'd be loud and clear. It sounded like it was just in the next room to me, or sometimes in the same room with me. I'd be looking around, "Where's my mother? I don't see her." But it still happens to this day. I still hear that voice, and it was my friend Becca Boyd who told me that it was my mother's mother, my grandmother, who reaches out to me from time to time, and usually, whether if I'm feeling down or not, or feeling a little bit alone or not feeling well, or sometimes when I don't get up to go to work and I'm taking a day off, I'll hear her call my name, and it's like, "It's okay, Grandma, I'm not going to work today. It's okay." So so usually once I do that, it stops. So I
Sure.
still hear it to this day, but it was never anything bad. The only bad experience I had was that one, and I think that related back to an experience that my sisters had with a Ouija board in the house that I was there for. I didn't really participate in it, but my sisters were watching me. My parents were out for the night. They had some of their girlfriends over, and they did a seance with a Ouija board and had some weird things happen. And I was there for it, just sitting there, not actually participating. But I saw what they all saw too, so it was kind of strange. And then from there, I would also have, I'd have like the deja vu thing. I'd maybe dream about a place, and then it could be 3 weeks later, it could be 3 months later, I'd find myself in that exact place that I'd never been before, and say, "Hey, I recognize this. Oh, I know where it was from." Or I'd have a dream about something that would just happen in mundane life. Maybe 3 or 4 days later, it would actually happen. So I had a lot of that going on when I was younger too. Not so much now, but when I was, a kid into my early teens, a lot of that would happen. I noticed that stopped happening after I had that one terrifying experience, and I just moved away from the paranormal altogether. I didn't have those type of things as often, although I would still hear my name called from time to time in the house, which again, that was just my grandmother reaching out to me.
Sure. What I find interesting here is your background in engineering. That's a left brain pursuit, as we all know. And
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
worked with
yeah.
engineers. I work for the Air Force in my civilian job, so we have somewhat similar day jobs, I guess you could say. How have you found? I found that it's kind of challenging talking to people in that environment about this stuff, and I'm wondering if you've kind of experienced the same thing in your day job and the field you work in engineering, where you found a lot of people not open to talking about this kind of stuff.
Actually, where I work, I'm with a lot of guys I went to college with and stuff. They actually they don't talk about it a ton, but they do come to me and talk about it, which is kind of interesting because you wouldn't think in the engineering field they would, but a lot of them, I was surprised. Here's a story I got for you. I just went over to there's a small officers club next door. It's where we go for lunch in the summer and stuff like that. They have barbecues and stuff like that. And I went over there and I hear some of my friends talking. I hear my name and I'm listening and I'm hearing them talking about the paranormal shows and stuff I'm doing and about what I do on the side. And I walked over. I said, "You guys are actually talking about me?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Why?" I said, "You've known me for like 20 years or 25 years. What do you?" He said, "Well, you're the only one of us on TV. That's pretty cool." So I find it very interesting. I think it's actually pretty cool, and some of them have opened up about experiences they have, and they're actually very willing to talk about it. And they ask me about it, right? Because they're looking for some answers themselves. So surprisingly, I'd say in at least the engineering field I'm in, it's about 50-50. About 50% of them kind of really don't believe in it and don't want to talk about it, and about 50% have had their own experiences and they do talk to me about it. Um, so it's kind of interesting. It's not what I thought either. I would have thought they kind of ostracize me for doing what I do, but they don't. They actually reach out to me at times. So I find that very interesting and pretty cool.
Yeah, that is interesting that you've had people open up to you. Now, I'm a paranormal investigator myself. I don't do it near as much as I used to with the podcast show now. And I've had people at work who've had some experiences. I've even had a couple of my own experiences, even at my work. So, yeah, it's interesting. And then you'll find people that really don't want to get into anything paranormal related when it comes into discussions. But that is interesting that you've had that level of interest with people you work with. One of the things I wanted to talk about, so you've done this book, Paranormal Research, back in 2018. Can you talk a little bit about, how this book really took root and how that's become such a big hit and has led to paranormal research courses now at the collegiate level?
Yeah, I started actually writing the book in about 2016, about mid 2016, and just started writing about the different equipment that we use, how to best use it, and I kept it to mostly some of the basics: audio recorders, CCTV, because it was going to be something that was for somebody just starting out, or if teams had new members, maybe they could utilize the book to get a good feel for how to best utilize the equipment without being too overly technical about it. Because I read lots of articles and read other books that sometimes got very technical in about the equipment and how it really worked, and it didn't really tell you what the best way to utilize it was. All right, the settings for it, the best use, things like that, the best type of audio recorders to look for. Didn't really get into that. So I tried to get more into that, the basics. If you're going to get into this, how much, what kind of recorder should I look for? What's the best way to utilize it? Especially today with all the digital stuff. I also got into software, some of the software that can be used. That's easy for somebody to use who's new to it. They don't have to spend a lot of money, and I kept a lot of it to that. Talked about some of the apps that were out there. Talked about CCTVs, where their history of them came from, how they came about, what they were originally used for, what we use them for, and the same with all the equipment. What it was used for, what do we use it for, and how does it work for us as investigators? So I started putting all that together, and as I got going with it, I said, I always thought, I'd really like to teach people about this someday. I'd been to other events where they kind of give you a learning, some teaching and stuff like that, especially the TAPS guys always did that with their different events. But nobody really got into the nuts and bolts of it, So I got a little bit more into the nuts and bolts, and I decided to write the book as a textbook. But in that textbook, I kept it a little bit more fun to read, engaging, keep people involved, so it's not just a dry read. And I also included some of our team's investigations. In the back of it, towards the other half of the book, it's like investigations, what equipment we did use, how we used it, what went on during that investigation, what we found, how we set the equipment up. Went through all of that, of an actual investigation, what we did, the history of the locations, how we researched that, what we did there. So I gave people, and some of them are private cases, some of them are historical sites. So I gave people a pretty good disbursement of different types of cases. And then I had each one of our investigators give some insight on each case as to what they got out of it, what it meant to them, and how it maybe changed or impacted their own life of the experience they had during that investigation and what it meant to them. So I did do that too, which I think gives people more of a personal, oh wow, this is how, when you're investigating, it does have an impact on you. The experiences you have, things you witness, and even how you help people has an impact on you. So I wanted people to read a little bit about that. So the book came out, got published by S.P.I.R.I.T Publishing in 2018. I finished it. I had to follow their guidelines for writing a manuscript and putting all the research part of it together and all that, which is very intense when you do that.
Sure, sounds like a lot of work.
You got to have your sources listed and everything else, and there is sources that are in there for different things. So I finally put it together, and they did it as a hardcover because they knew, eventually hoping that you're going to do a course with it. And it wasn't until last year, 2019, I had actually, toward the end of 2018, I had reached out to my local community college that I graduated from, Hudson Valley Community College. I'm an alumni from there. And I reached out to them about maybe letting me give the course. And they said, well, we'll think about it, whatever. And it wasn't until, I think, August of last year, they actually finally wrote me back, emailed me back, said, Mr. Kenny, would you still be interested in giving your course? And I was like, yes, absolutely I would. Because it's been a thing of mine I've wanted to do forever. So we did. We we worked it out. We got to give the course. We had 11 people sign up for the first course. Went really well. The course, not only, it's a non-credit course. It's not a full semester or anything like that. It's a 5-day course, part of which includes an actual investigation. So you have class time. We talk about everything. They get homework to do. They get chapters they got to read. We go over equipment. We go over a lot of things, answer a lot of questions. We even touch on spiritual protection, because we're talking about a spiritual realm. So we get into a little bit of that. And if you're going to be in investigating, then you want to have some type of faith to believe in, something for protection from other things that are out there. So we talk about all this stuff. We actually do an investigation over at Cohoes Music Hall in Cohoes, New York, which is a well-known haunted location, and it went really well. They had a great time. They've learned a lot. They're still together. The whole 11 people who took the course are still together as one team, and they're still going out and doing more together. So they actually did learn a lot from it, and I still am keeping in touch with them, and we're still helping them to learn more as they go. Now Hudson Valley is going to be holding the course again, and then we're hoping to hold a 102 course later this fall there. And then also Schenectady Community College has also reached out to us here in New York to give the course, the 101 course. So we're moving along, and it's just always been something I would hope we could do and help kind of bring some continuity to the paranormal field in a more serious setting. You know what I'm saying? So we're doing that finally, and that's exciting for me. It's something I've always wanted to do.
I find that there's so much variation in terms of how people approach the paranormal, what their belief system is, what kind of equipment to use. And so it's kind of reassuring to know that, you know, you've got this course here that people can learn from, and it sounds like this 101 course is kind of a baseline course. Now, is there any official certification as part of this course? If I'm somebody who is not a college student, can I sign up for your course and just take it, and do I get some sort of certification?
There's no certification per se. I give you a certificate at the end that just says you took the course, stuff like that. But it's not a certification course. You know, paranormal is paranormal. You can't necessarily get certified as a paranormal investigator. But I think what we can do, and this is just the beginning, maybe someday that'll happen. But for me, this is kind of just the inklings of the beginning of maybe working towards that end, where we have just some basic guidelines. And what I drew from when I wrote my book was not just from my own team and our own way of doing things. I talked to other teams about and get a consensus on some basic things that all the teams that are doing like research and also helping people out there, kind of some certain guidelines we try to follow on a standard basis, so to speak. Not everybody does everything the same way, and nobody's ever going to do everything the same way. But there are some basic guidelines I think that we can follow, which is like when we're dealing with clients and maybe having, because we have a 13-page form we send to a client for them to fill out and send it back to us before we'll really take their case. Instead of just, oh, this person says they have a haunting, we're just going to run in there and go do it. What we do, and we got that idea for the form, and we kind of based our form off of something that TAPS came out with many years ago. So it's not even our our design. It was a form that TAPS originally used when they were taking clients in. And I think that's a great idea because you can gather a lot of information. It asks everything about, everything from, not just what's going on at the home, but what type of medications people are taking in the home, who's, if there's any mental illness, anything they went through in their past. There's all this information that's provided that we collect in order to help them the best we can, and maybe even say, hey, part of what we want to do here is have you reach out to somebody who's a professional that maybe you can talk to, because there's obviously some other things going on here. Or are they already? And if they are already, that's great. If they have somebody they can talk to, or their doctor or something like that, that's great. So that's part of what we do when we're doing residential cases. But I think just the form itself is just one thing that we could say, if you're really going to get into this and you're going to help, at least with residential cases, we actually even have a form for businesses, which doesn't ask all those types of things, but it gathers some information on how old the business is, what the people there are experiencing, how long these experiences have been going on from previous people who work there, if there's any history of that. So it collects a little bit different information, but it provides, the forms provide a guideline of, if you're going to be doing this, this is the type of information you want to try to collect. Maybe you can modify it for yourself, but we're doing this. And then when we're talking about equipment and how to use it and how to best use it, there's just practices that can be put into place. Just like in engineering or just like anything else, there's certain practices that you follow for consistency, especially when you're reviewing, I like to call it not evidence, but data. If you're reviewing data, there's a certain way for consistency you want to go through your data and look for certain things. And so we provide people with a little bit of that too. What's the best way to review your data together? All right. If you find an EVP, don't tell everybody else on the team what you think it says. Just tell them, hey, in this section of the audio, there's an EVP. I want you to check it out. Or what I believe is an EVP, I want you to check it out and get their consensus on it, of what they think it says, too. And then you can all come to a conclusion. So there's different things like that we're teaching them in these classes and stuff, as well as working together as a team. Who's the best team leader on the investigation? Who's the best at the technology, dealing with the tech, making sure everybody is set up for what they need. Who's the best at this? Who's the best at that? Just because you're maybe a team founder doesn't mean you should be the team leader on every investigation. Some people have better skills at that than others. That's a good point with Spirits of New England. Ellen McNeil and Beck Gann are the team founders, but on every investigation, when I'm there, I'm the team leader. I organize the team and tell them where we probably should be setting up equipment. I get everything organized and all that because I'm good at that, because that's what I do in my job too. I used to be a project leader, so I'm good at that. So you got to look for people's skills, and we talk about that when they're organizing teams, and we make them organize a team. So that's part of what we do with the class too. We break them up into teams and we make them choose who their team leaders and stuff are going to be, and they learn from that. So there's a lot that's involved, but I think you can bring some continuity to investigating through courses like this.
Sure.
Certification, that's a little further out. You're not going to get anybody certified as a paranormal investigator in 5 classes, right? But I will give you, I do give them a piece of paper. It says it's a certificate of completion of the course. That's what we give them. Of course, you did this, and there you go.
It's always good to have something in hand that makes you feel like
basics to get a good start as a team.
Sure. Jack, talk to me about how important do you feel it is doing research when you're preparing for and leading up to an investigation?
It depends. Then I'd say it depends sometimes on the investigation. You want to do research on every investigation. It is important. I'll do, like when I'm dealing a residential case, I'll do some research into a little bit of the history of the location. But I don't end up doing too much because it can kind of taint your view of what might be going on before you walk into the place. So it's good to at least research the experiences the people are having. talk to them, get their input on it, do a little bit of background on the location. Then I like to go in and actually investigate, see if we get anything, go through the data, see what we find as evidence, and see if we get any names or things like that, and then do the research, more detailed research on the property or the house or the location, and see what history jives with any potential evidence we got. Let the evidence lead you to the answer. Don't lead yourself to a pre-conclusion, right? Which I think can happen sometimes if you do too much research, and at least in residential cases, things like that. Even in historical sites, I have people. Anytime we do historical sites, they give us all the information on the whole thing and who's there and who they think is there and all that, and that's great. But now I sometimes find ourselves going in and asking for the person they think is there, and that may not be the case at all. So then I got to go step back and go, you know what? I'm letting them lead me towards what they want to find. And
Sure.
I can't do that. You can't let that happen. You can't let your client lead you towards what they want the result to be. You have to go in and go in with a blank slate, so to speak, and let the experiences and let the data bring you to the real conclusion. And we've done that, and that's important. So I do like to do more research after the fact, after the investigation, rather than before, to see what ties in to the data that we do get, the evidence that we might get. So that's my view on it. Okay, and that's how I usually approach it. Do a little bit before, do a lot after, and then see where it all connects. But it is very important to do it. You have to do it. It's just whether you want to do it before or after. I just worry about tainting myself with an answer before I actually get one if I do too much beforehand.
Sure. That certainly makes sense. And the group that I work with, we kind of tried to approach it in a similar fashion. There might be a little bit of historical research done, but, asking too many questions from clients and trying to get too much information, you kind of, like you said, maybe you get too much preconceived notion about what may be going on before you're collecting the evidence and trying to let the evidence take you where it will.
Right.
And so I think that's an important thing.
And by doing too much, you can actually miss out on what's really going on, too. Because you get so focused on saying, they really think this person is here. You keep spending the whole time trying to reach out to that particular spirit, and they may not even be there. Now you're missing out on what could be there.
Sure.
And you get no evidence. You say, the place is not haunted. We didn't get anything. Well, you may just not have, you're trying to talk to somebody who's not there, so nobody else is going to interact with you. I've seen that happen and gone into a location and had all kinds of experiences because we just opened up and said, look, we don't know who's here. We're here, and we let them know. One of the things I like to say to this is, tell them who I am, tell them why I'm there, whoever it is that's there, and explain a little bit about who we are, what we're trying to do, and say, we're here to talk to you. I want to hear from you. I want to know what's important to you. Why are you trying to reach out? What are you trying to get across? That's what we're here to do. You can talk to us. You reach out to us. You can interact with us, but you're scaring these other people. But interact with us. Tell us. Try to tell us what's happening, what's going on. Because I also feel a lot of times hauntings are often misunderstood. What can seem like something evil is just somebody desperate, really reaching out for help in a way.
Sure.
And that can turn into scratching, hitting, things moving, and it's just out of desperation. It's like the drowning person, right? If somebody's drowning, you go out to try to save them, and they'll try to drag you under.
Sure.
Because they're desperate.
Yeah.
To try to be saved. So it's like anything else. You got to know how to handle that situation and how to deal with it, right? Just like professionals who go save drowning people, right? The lifeguards and stuff. They're trained how to get you out of that situation without you dragging them down. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and I've seen that in a lot of investigations. And also, if you take that approach, even if there is something negative there, if you're dealing with like a negative or even demonic type haunting, you're less likely to disturb something or stir something up for that family that has to stay there later. You take a different approach to it, and it may just, try to fool you and play with you. But, if you have sensitives on the team or psychic, they'll kind of pick it out eventually anyway, that you're dealing with something that's not quite what it seems to be. But you approach it from a different manner and just keep things calm, and you'll still get results. You'll still get answers, but you won't leave the family there to suffer the consequences of your screaming and yelling at something.
Sure.
And pissing it off.
Now, what I wanted to ask you, you've been doing this for a long time. What is one of the experiences that really just absolutely blew your mind? What are the most significant experiences you've had since paranormal investigating?
Oh, geez, there's a few. Really, that blew my mind. There was, and I really wasn't investigating at that time. We had investigated this location. It was out by Seneca Lake. I can't give the name of the location because they didn't want people to know where this bed and breakfast was. But when they were building fixing the place up to be a bed and breakfast, they started having activity, and we went out and we helped them with it. And there's nothing bad there or anything like that. But because we had done such a great job, they offered us to come back and just stay there. So my wife and I went back at one point, and we just stayed. And I had told, there was a little girl that was there, and there's a woman that's there. And the little girl is a little mischievous and stuff. But I had said at the beginning of the day, I said, hey, if I got time tonight, I'll break out the K2 and, we can play and I'll interact, we can interact and stuff like that. And that was kind of my own fault for doing that. Again, nothing malicious, but that night we were so exhausted after being on the wine trail that I just went to bed, and I couldn't fall asleep for whatever reason. I was just laying there. My wife fell asleep, but I'm just laying there, and I'm laying there, and I'm laying on my side, and all of a sudden I feel something grab my ankle and yank it. I'm like, uh-oh. And then, so I'm still laying on my side with my back to the edge of the bed, and I feel a hand on my hip and a hand on my shoulder, and it starts rocking me back and forth. No BS. It felt like a person.
Wow.
Just pushing me back and forth. And I hear this little girl's voice, play with me, Jack. Play with me. Come on, play with me, Jack. And I'm like, oh no, what did I do? So I just, all I could see, I closed my eyes, and I'm like, if I turn around and look, all I could see, thinking what I was going to see was that little girl from The Grudge, that thing from The Grudge.
Oh, that would be a horrible sight.
I don't want to look. I don't want to see that. I probably wouldn't have saw anything, but that's all I could envision. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to look back. So I just envisioned the bright white light. I use a white light protection technique. I envisioned the white light kept surrounding me, pushing me away. I said, no, go away right now. We're not going to play. I'm too tired. Go away. Just leave me alone. And it stopped. It did. It stopped, and she went away, and I didn't have anything happen the rest of the night. I think I finally fell asleep about 4 a.m, though. After I was too exhausted.
I could see how that would make you feel restless.
Yeah, I gotta say, that was one of the freakiest things.
Now, Jack, is this the first time you've really experienced anything where you felt like it is either attached to you or followed you home when you've been at a location?
Well, again, that wasn't really an attachment or anything like that. That was just, we were at that location, and she tried to interact after I told her I probably would try to. I did have an attachment one time, and it was shown on Haunted Case Files, where I had been in an investigation in Mendon, Mass. It's not quite what they showed on Haunted Case Files, but there had been, we didn't know about it at the time, but there had been an accident less than a mile from the place. This one gentleman was killed instantly. And while we were at Mendon at the Taft Public Library, we were getting a lot of interaction at one point, and we had things come through one of the devices like HIT, pain, police, all this stuff, and we're like, what does that have to do with the library? What's that all about? Anyways, so something made a connection, and you could feel the energy around you. And when I left there, we had trouble locking one of the doors. We had to make sure all the doors were locked when we left. We had trouble with one. It took about 30 minutes. We finally got it locked. and I forgot to clear myself before I left. So I got in my car and I was driving back home, which is about a 3-hour drive, and I got thinking about it on the way back. I said, geez, I never cleared myself. I ought to do that. And I'm like, I'm about 40 minutes from home now. So I move over a lane, and there's something in the road right in front of me. And it was too late to swerve or get out of the way. I'm like, oh my God, I got my Dodge Charger. I'm like, I hope I go right over the top of it. I didn't. I hit the thing. It wipes out my front end. I get off the road. I had to be towed, everything else. I was fine. Nobody got hurt. It was just me in the car anyway. But I had to get towed and everything else. So the thing that I hit turned out to be part of a bumper off a semi-truck. It was about 6 feet long, about 2.5 feet wide, about the size of a person. Well, after I get home, I'm researching some of the information, the words we got through the devices, and I kept putting like police and hit and all these words in Mendon, and this guy's accident kept coming up. This is when I found out about the guy's accident. And again, he had been hit by a car, killed instantly, and it happened less than a mile from the Taft Public Library. A girl came around a blind curve. The guy was pulled over to the side of the road, but he was out by his vehicle, and she hit him and killed him instantly. Actually, there was a name that came through, Carlos, and I had put that in too, and it turns out that there was a guy, Carlos, I won't give his last name, but he was an actual eyewitness to the accident. So that came through on our radar, on our equipment. I think it was a ghost radar we were using at the time. But it came through on the device, and so we had all these words, including the guy's, the witness's name, and I found it, not looking for him, like, son of a gun. The guy, I believe, attached to me and tried to get my attention, and I think I had the accident because of the attachment. And when I went back, we had to go back later on. I had to wait for my car to be repaired. About 3 weeks later, we go back. We talked to the people at the library about what we found, what went on, and I did go back and talk to that individual who was in the accident report, in the newspapers and stuff, and we connected with him again. So we tried to move him on. Hopefully we got him to cross over. But that was one time where I had an attachment that I believe caused me to have an accident to get my attention. And, well, hopefully we helped him move on in the end. We felt like he did. Nobody's had any experiences with that individual there ever since. So, but I did leave with an attachment. Yeah, that does happen. It can happen. And not always in the way you think. It's bad, but sometimes bad things happen because of it.
Sure. Now that's one of those stories. It's an intriguing story, but it's also got a spooky element there to it, and the fact that that may led to.
Again, it was nothing really negative. He just was desperate to get my attention, and I think it's because basically I'm kind of, at that time I was basically the psychic on the team, so I think he was trying to reach out more to me, and I forgot to clear myself before I left. So my own fault, once again. You got to make sure you do these things before you leave locations. Make sure you tell them they can't follow you home. Do a small cleansing. Use whatever technique you use to clear yourself of spirit energy. Don't forget to do it. That's when you have problems and you bring stuff home with you.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting stuff. It really is. I heard you mention that earlier that you've never really had any bad experiences, and that's pretty much been the case for me as well, doing paranormal investigating for over 6 years. And talk to me a little bit about how that differs from what you see on TV versus reality.
Yeah, TV is, I always tell people, remember, TV is about entertainment. It's to entertain people. It's not to tell always the real story that happened. Although with our house media, I've over the years helped. I'm not the only one, but a lot of us on that show have helped to convince these people that the stories that we tell them, the actual experiences, are compelling enough. Don't mess with them, And they don't, for the most part. They're about usually 70-80% correct, of what they tell. And then there's the 10 to 20% or 30% that they make up on the reenactments. and they play it up a bit, but they don't do it too bad. But for the most part, TV, movies, things like that, it's about entertaining you. So sometimes the people around those shows overreact a bit because they're supposed to make it more exciting. I mean, it's just part of doing TV. When I just sit there and get interviewed, that's a whole different thing. I'm just telling them what I know, and what I really experienced. And in real life, investigating is extremely boring because most of the time you're talking to nothing in the dark and hoping to get an answer, which is kind of like the definition of insanity, right? So and a lot of times nothing happens, or when it does finally happen, it's very quick. It doesn't last very long. It's a quick, either you saw something quick, or you maybe saw a light anomaly or a flash of some kind, or you may not have seen anything, and it's you play back your audio and video, and that's where you find it. So a lot of times you don't think you experienced anything. It's very rare somebody gets scratched or bruised or anything like that. I can name on one hand. I can count on one hand the number of times that's happened to somebody on our team. Even just being touched. Okay, I can add that to two hands, but it's rare. It doesn't happen a lot. We've done hundreds of cases. So yeah, it's completely different. The real stuff is completely different from the TV stuff for the most part. Some of the techniques they use, those are actual techniques we use out in the field. The equipment they use, some of us use some of that equipment. We don't use all of it. I like to try to keep it to basics. I even use dowsing rods. I get some good interaction with those. There's a lot of different things we use, but I also use an SLS camera. And I did not buy one. A friend of mine gave me one, so he was buying a new one, so he gave me his old one. I'm like, oh gee, thanks, I appreciate that. So it was a very good friend of mine, so I greatly appreciate him giving me that. But and that's part of what we talk about when we give the course too. Forget what you saw on TV. I gotta show you what it's really like, and teach about what it's really like. And that's what they learn. It can be very boring.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you touched on that because I've experienced that so many times where I've went out and you have this. Sometimes you have this unrealistic expectation that you're going to go out and this is going to be the night that you're going to see that that full body apparition, and then you go out and nothing happens. And you especially find this with newer people. They may be going out experiencing it for the first time, and you try to tell them that just like you touched on that hey, this requires some patience and some you're going to sit around and have a lot of downtime, and it's not like things are going to be moving around all the time, although I've had plenty of strange experiences myself, just like you alluded to. I mean, I've had a lot of experiences over time. Some of our other team members have seen full-bodied apparitions. I've never seen a full-bodied apparition. I've seen a full-blown shadow figures straight on, not out of the corner of my eye, looking straight at them. I've seen them. One of them just about 3 feet away from me. So, I've seen some really strange things. I've experienced some strange things. I've heard disembodied voices hear those quite often. But it doesn't happen for everybody. And some people, I think part of investigating, people go in with unrealistic expectations, and then nothing happens, and they think it's all, this is all bogus, it doesn't really exist. You've got to give it time, and you've got to open up to it. And we teach some of our people meditation techniques, things like that they can open themselves up a little bit more. Or different stones they can use, like black tourmaline, which will offer protection, but it'll help you open up a little bit psychically. Not so much psychically, but it'll help open up your senses a little bit so that you're more sensitive to what's going on. But I think realistically, I used to hunt and fish, and that taught you a lot of patience. And I think that's most of it is having patience, really sitting, listening to what's going on around you, paying attention to what's going on around you. And you will notice things. If you really get in depth of focusing on what's happening around you, get in tune with your environment, you'll start to notice things you didn't before. Stop looking for that one thing and just
open yourself up to what's happening. You know, I think you'll have more experiences that way. You'll catch things that you wouldn't have before because you're looking for that full-bodied apparition and you're missing something else.
Sure. Hey, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, for those people that are new to the field, they're just getting started, they're going out to, maybe they're a new team, they've never really done this before. What's some general pointers you can give them? I think you've already touched on a few, but what's some general pointers you can give them to have some better success and to approach it in a better and more professional manner?
Some pointers I can give to have some better success is, again, if you're going as a group, if there's only two of you, stay together. Don't wander off because you want each other there for validation if something does happen. So don't wander off from each other, and that's just for safety reasons as well. Something happens to one of you, you got the other person there to help you. But to begin with, what I tell people that go into a haunted location, if you got 4 or 5 of you, break up into groups then, like 3 and 2. And when you first start out, just sit there. Just sit there and take in the room. Listen to what's going on. Feel the room out. And by that I mean, does the room feel heavy? Does it feel like you shouldn't be in that room? You get that feeling of, wow, like you just walked into a bar and there's like a fight about to break out, and you can sense it. Does it feel strange, feel odd, or does it just feel normal? If an area or a room just feels empty, so to speak, move on to another spot. See what you find. See what you feel. Look for activity that way. Look for what feels off or what feels different, or what if a room feels heavy. Hang in that spot for a while, and even just don't ask all these just, hey, are you dead? How did you die? Don't ask those questions. Start off with something like what I mentioned earlier. Hey, this is who we are. This is why we're here. We want to talk to you. We want to find out about you. We want to hear from you. What's important to you? Use that type of thing as if you're trying to meet a friend for the first time. You're trying to interact with these people. Don't insult them. If somebody came to you and just started asking you random questions, you'd get like, what the hell are you doing? And you'd walk away because you just get annoyed. And spirits will do the same thing. So try to interact with them a little bit. Try to find out a little bit about them. And sometimes just sit quiet and just listen to the room, see what happens, see what you hear. Talk amongst yourselves about just even your daily, what happened this week in your life, or things like that. You will find sometimes spirit will jump in and start communicating. You might see that K2 start lighting up because they want to join in on your conversation. That works really well. Try those types of things. Don't just go in and start asking random questions, and it doesn't work, and you won't really have anything happen, or if you do, it'll be the typical something's thrown at you, or it'll be the typical kitchen EVP that says, get out. Because you know what? I tell you to get out, too, if you came in my house and started talking to me that way. Try different things. Think outside the box. TV can sometimes be a little bit useful to get some ideas and stuff, but that's not real investigating. But think how you'd like to talk to somebody and try to talk to them. Try to talk to spirits that way.
Yeah.
As if you met somebody for the first time, which you really are.
And I think if there's one thing I can take away from what you just said right there, Jack, it is be respectful. Be respectful just like you would be respectful to another human being. Go in with respect and try to make an honest connection. And that's, if there's any one thing I can take away that was really important what you said there, always be respectful in a location. And you'll see in shows where they provoke and they do those sorts of things. And, I personally feel like that is something that you should hardly ever do. Right. So I think that's one of the important things you touched on.
I agree with that. Yeah, there is ways, and that's something else we cover in our course. There is ways to provoke. My book talks about that, but in a nice way. And people say, well, how do you provoke in a nice way? Well, how you provoke in a nice way is by what we talked a little bit about before, knowing a little bit about a location before you walk in, maybe knowing a little bit about the people that live there. And you can use that. You could look at the house and go, wow, I don't know if I live in a house like this. It looks a little run down. You know, you're kind of like insulting them a little bit, but it's like, I'm sure it wasn't like this when you were. Well, you still live here, but I'm sure it wasn't always like this. Does anybody take care of this place? Or you may get a response that way, and not a totally negative response. I mean, they say, I can't take care of it anymore. They may say, I need help, or but there's ways to provoke without being rude.
Sure. Now, Jack, do you work with psychics and mediums when you go in and do an investigation sometimes?
Well, I am one, so I guess I do. Yeah, I don't doubt that very much, but I am. I do have those abilities. But yes, I do, and I do believe that some people have true abilities. And this was even before a friend of mine helped connect me with my own. I always believed that some people, like my friend Becca Boyd, have true psychic abilities, mediumship abilities. I have my other partner here, Carly Hall, who's has a lot of abilities and very strong psychic medium, and she's only 23, and she's extremely gifted. So not everybody is. Some people are. When I use mine, I typically just use them on cases. I don't go out and do readings for people or anything like that. I just don't do that. And nothing against people that do. I just don't do that. It's not my thing. I prefer to just save it for client cases, and if somebody has something that's coming through that's a message for them, I'll give it to them. Or sometimes it's helpful to the case. I can read somebody and tell them things that they hadn't even told me. So I will use it for that. Like I may get spirit connect with me, tell me, hey, this person had this happened to them when they were younger, and I'll go. I'll be very diplomatic about how I approach that, because usually it's something very bad. And I'll say, did something happen to you when you were younger? And what do you mean? Well, don't freak out, but I'm getting this. And I'll be very specific that, this particular incident happened to them. And they'll go, how did you know that? I didn't tell you that. And that's when somebody else is coming through, a family member or somebody is coming through. So I use it for that. But I don't do readings or but yes, I do work with them. Yes.
Interesting.
And I think they can be very useful to helping you resolve cases.
Interesting. Yeah. So the thing that I would be a little bit hesitant with is when you're initially going on an investigation. And you talked about this, or you touched on this already. You don't want to be led into a certain direction before you've had a chance to try and gather evidence, because let's face it, certain people out there are never going to believe in this until, we capture that good evidence that you can present, and even then you're still not going to convince them. What is one of the most active locations that you can talk about that you've investigated?
Actually, one of the most active locations I've ever investigated was a residential case out in Springfield, Massachusetts. It's actually, you may find this odd, but we wrote about it. I wrote about it in a graphic novel that I did. It's called The Forgotten Souls of Bay Path, and it had to do with this client who was having all these experiences. And that was one case. We went to that case. We experienced everything. In one night, we experienced everything that individual told us he was experiencing. I never saw anything like it. That's the one where I had the shadow figure 3 feet away from me, looking straight at it. I had something grabbing at the calf of my leg. We heard disembodied voices. We captured disembodied voices. We captured a lot of EVPs. We saw different strange anomalies. We didn't capture them all on video, but we saw them with our own eyes. So we experienced everything this particular person did, and it had to do with the location of where their house was compared to what's called Bay Path Cemetery, actual cemetery in Springfield, Mass, which is a pauper cemetery. There's over 1,000 people buried there, and it's less than half the size of a football field, and it's all unmarked graves. So it had to do with that, and the fact that he was a nurse at this Kindred Hospital, which was also just down the road from his home and the cemetery. And the location of Kindred Hospital was at one time the location of the poorhouse where all those people in Bay Pass Cemetery were buried from. So it was a big triangle of all this stuff going on and why they were connected with him and what happened there. So yeah, that was the most active case I'd ever been on. Most active location. I can't say it is anymore, but it was at that time. I would say the next most active location was USS Constitution that we did. We investigated that for the Navy in Charlestown, Mass. That's old Ironsides, the old, still commissioned wooden naval ship, the USS Constitution. That's a very haunted ship, but nothing bad. It's just the old sailors are still there. You know, they're still on their ship watching over it. That's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, they're still keeping watch. How important do you think experimentation is when doing paranormal investigating?
Well, experimenting with different techniques, different equipment, things like that, I'd say is very important because you want to try different things. I always say this: pretty much anything can work. It's all about explaining to the spirit that's there how they can interact with it, what you're there for. And different spirits react to different types of devices, or even just different types of techniques. One technique might work with to get activity or get responses out of one spirit, where those same techniques won't work with another. So you've got to experiment with different things, trigger objects, different types of equipment, anything, a balloon, feathers, anything. It's all subjective in the end. You've got to really go through the data and figure out. I never go by one piece of evidence anyway. It's not just one thing. It's bringing several things together. You capture an EVP, you have a personal experience, and maybe you capture something on video at the same time, a light anomaly of some kind, and it all happens at the same moment. Well, there's three pieces of data that add up to one piece of evidence. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
So you've got to look at it all, and you've got to try different things to see what's going to work. I just stay away from trying the negative things like, instigating or screaming and yelling and demanding anything. I won't do that. I won't try that because I think it just leads to more negativity. That's all.
Sure. Have you experienced poltergeist activity during investigations?
Me personally, no. I've never seen anything move. Never. Unless you count the time I got rocked back and forth on a bed by some spirit little girl. I mean, me. So
yeah, that might constitute that.
I've never seen anything move, float, anything. I just haven't had that experience yet. Another person on our team did have that happen to them. They saw it move. I think it was just what the heck was it? It was one of our devices. They saw the K2 slide across the floor. I've never seen it. I wasn't there when that happened. She saw it. One of the other investigators was looking the other way, so she didn't see it. But I believe that person. I know that person very well, so I believe what they saw. We didn't capture it on video or anything either. But that's one thing I've never experienced, poltergeist activity. I know people who have. I have clients that have. After getting to know them, I believe them. I believe what happened to them. I couldn't explain how it happened, but because they showed me, and it's like, okay, I don't know how the glass got from your countertop over to the middle of your kitchen floor, turned upside down with the water still in it. You got me on that one.
Yeah,
they left it there, and I saw it sitting there, like. You got me on that one.
Yeah, that's a hard one to explain.
They actually saw the glass go fly off and end up that way. Just leave it there. I'll be there. And they did. They left it. Hey, you got me on that one.
So this kind
I can't see somebody going through all the trouble of doing that. This particular individual didn't have any reason to do that, and we did. That actually was a demonic case. Turned out to be.
Wow.
An actual demonic case. So that's where you get really weird things that can happen like that. Unexplainable things.
Now, we talked a little bit about experimentation, and there's this thing called the Singapore theory, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, where you're kind of trying to recreate an environment maybe of something that happened in the past? And have you experimented much with using that? And if so, have you had success with that?
No, I haven't. For the types of cases, I usually work in residential cases. I haven't really needed to do that. We did, I shouldn't say we never did, we did experiment with that on the USS Constitution, where the boatswain's mate who was with us the second night went through the whole preparation for gun firing. And it's a whole series, and that's actually laid out in my book, Paranormal Research. And he went through the whole process, all the commands and everything else. And we did get one EVP out of it. And he said that's the only thing you should have gotten. And he was there when we played it back for the captain and the officers. And the one response, there's one order at the end that says stand by. And we had the response standing by. He goes, that's the only response I should have got, and it worked. Things like that. Some of the sailors came in and just started going through typical routines, and we caught some EVPs during that. So yeah, we did kind of do those things, and it did work. I think that things like that can work better in more like historical type sites, rather than so much residential cases. They're a little bit different. I mean, it could work on a residential case if under the right circumstances, but usually residential cases, I'm there for kind of a different reason. I'm not just trying to figure out who's there. I'm trying to figure out what this spirit is trying to get across to this family. So I'm more focused on that end of it rather than trying to do a reenactment of something. Although, if somebody was murdered in the house, you could potentially reenact that murder, and maybe that's the spirit you're dealing with. Then again, maybe it's not. So, but yeah, it does work. It's a good technique, and it can work and be very useful. And sometimes it doesn't.
Sure. Absolutely, and that goes along with that experimentation thing. Do you think ghosts or spirits can draw energy from batteries in equipment, and have you experienced this on investigations?
Yeah, they definitely can, and yeah, I've experienced it on more than one investigation. I've had batteries drained, just put them in, go into the house, you're not in there like 15, 20 minutes, and the batteries are dead. Those are brand new batteries. So, and then you'll put a new pair in, and you might be there for 2 hours, and they die. And these are good. These are the good batteries. I buy Energizer batteries. I don't buy cheap junk.
Sure.
This is good stuff, and I'm like, you're killing my batteries, man. I've actually seen batteries drained and then come back. I've seen that too. Like for the cameras, the rechargeable batteries. It looks like it's completely drained, and the camera will go off, and then 2 minutes later, you look at it, and it's got almost a full charge still.
Yeah.
It's like, but what happened there? I've seen that happen too. So yeah, they definitely draw energy. I mean, that's one thing that the flashlight thing can actually really work, where they can. What we started doing, instead of trying to set up the flashlight so it's part way off, we just turn the flashlights on and tell them to shut it off. I've seen it work. Now you explain to me how a fully on flashlight gets shut off.
Right.
Draw the power from it. They drain it.
Right, and what you're talking about here.
That's more of an actual positive affirmation that something's interacting with that flashlight to shut it off, to draw the power enough to shut the light off, rather than having it part way on and they suppose we can turn the light on. So we've started trying to do that, and I've seen it work on occasions. It doesn't work all the time, but I've seen it work in certain cases, and that's more interesting to me than anything else. And actually, I didn't think about that until I was on doing an event one time, and this woman who just was new to it all, and I said, yeah, I do the flashlight technique where and she just turned her flashlight on and started asking questions, and her flashlight would go off. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not how I meant for you to use it, but holy cow, that's working. That's where I got the idea from. I know other people have got the idea anyway, but until I saw that woman do that, it's like, I never thought of trying it that way. Oh, something's actually shutting her flashlight off.
It's interesting that you said...
and that was a push-button flashlight.
Wow.
It was push it on.
It's interesting that you said...
And on every question, it went on for maybe about 5 minutes. Every time we asked a question, it would shut the light off. if it was that individual, like, because we were actually in a cemetery. We were asking about the person whose flashlight, where she set the flashlight up on top of the gravestone, and we were talking to that person, and they kept interacting.
Wow.
They're very strange, very strange. I'd never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
So that's how I do that now with the flashlight. I just turn it on and ask them to just shut it off.
Wow, and that's pretty compelling if you are getting, as you said, and we're, for the listeners, we're talking about the mag flashlights where the front end of it, you can loosen that connection a little bit. But
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me that you've actually had results when you've turned that thing on all the way. That is even more compelling. That you've had some interaction.
It doesn't matter what kind of flashlight it is. A push button, a mag light, just a switch one, the old-fashioned more switched ones on the top. Once that flashlight's on, it should stay on until that battery dies. But I've seen flashlights go off in response to questions.
Yeah, and
explain that one to me.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It can go off and then come back on.
Yeah, and I've experienced that with a little bit of the looser connection, but that would be even more compelling what you just mentioned. It looks like, Jack, we're getting a little short on time. So maybe if you could share with the listeners how they find your work, whether it's a website or where your books are for sale on Amazon or otherwise.
Yep. You can, if you want to reach out to me, I always try to answer everybody's questions. You can find me on Facebook. It's just look up Jack Kenna, and my main Facebook page is Jack NY46. So it's just Facebook/jackn.com/Jack NY46, so like Jack New York 46. And you can also get me through my website at jackkenna.org. It's just jackkenna.org. And any of my books, if you want to find any of my books, are all on Amazon.com. They're also on BarnesandNoble.com. Just go over there, do a search for my name, Jack Kenna, and all my books will come up. And there's Paranormal Research, there's Hauntings, Ghosts, and Demons, there's the comic book, The Spirits of Forgotten Souls of Bay Path. They're all on there. There's reviews on there about all of them. So check them out and reach out to me anytime you'd like.
Yeah, hey, Jack, it's been an amazing discussion. We could talk about this stuff for hours. Unfortunately, we only have so much time to do it. I'd love to have you back on sometime to talk again. It's been really interesting, and best of luck to you and all your future research and work and investigations in your classes. It's going to be interesting to see how all that progresses, and whether you get into the 102 courses and whether there's just kind of how they progress down the road. So really appreciate you talking with me tonight and spending the time with me, and you have a great night.
I greatly appreciate it, Curry. It's been an honor to be on your show. I greatly appreciate it. And same to you. I hope things always keep moving forward for you, and keep going out there and trying to help those that you can.
All right. Sounds great. Have a great night again, Jack.
You too, Curry.
Well, there you have it, folks. That was my interview with Mr. Jack Kenna. I really hope you enjoyed that one as much as I did. I thought that was a really exciting and intriguing discussion with Jack. And another thing I forgot to mention is if you head over to the website, the other thing you can do is you can subscribe to our newsletter, and that'll help you keep up to date on what's going on with the podcast and any other relevant information about the show. And just understand your information is not going to be shared with anybody. We're not going to put you on any other emailer list. So we'll hope you go over there and subscribe to the show. You can also find a link on the Facebook page, subscribe to the newsletter. So I hope you'll do that. Please make sure you don't miss next episode when I'm going to have Preston Dennett on the show once again. I love having Preston on the show. He does so much fascinating research on the UFO subject. And he's got another book out. This time he's covering more research he's done about onboard UFO experiences. So really looking forward to that one, and I hope you'll join me for that show. It's going to be a great one. Once again, thank you so much for tuning into the show, and thank you for supporting the show, and have a great night, everybody.